I realize there's so many opportunities around me. I think you can really succeed where you're at if you try.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Amazing Marketing Show, where we talk about all things marketing, and we love bringing you the very best guests to talk about marketing. And we're not just talking about marketing experts, blah, blah, blah. You've heard it before. We're talking about people who are in real business, like real estate and other things like that. And by the way, you'll find out they're not in the main cities that you would expect. They're not in Austin, Texas. Not everyone is in Austin or San Diego or LA. Okay, not even Vegas. There's more places out there. So I'm really happy about the guests that we have today, and I'm looking forward to Chris Gray, my co-host, introducing Chris. How's it going?
Dmitri, what up, bro?
I'm very excited about this episode. Give us an intro.
Man, this guy right here. I don't, you ever meet somebody in business and you know they do well and all the signs around them, they don't tell you, right? They don't tell you who they are. They don't tell you how much money. They're not flashy, but you see all these indicators of big success, right? You're like, oh, this person's a big deal. I don't know what the fuck our guest does. I don't know. He just owns a bunch of shit, basically runs a city. I was in South Dakota with my man, Scott Duncan here. I was in South Dakota, where he's from. I'll let him tell more about it. Rapid, South Dakota, and we're just walking around, and we walk into a building, and he's showing me the building, and he's like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I own this building." What? And then we're like going to different places, and like people are walking up to him, and how people, they're not just saying hi or like shaking his hand. That type of, it's almost like they make themselves smaller and they're shaking his hand. I'm not over exaggerating. Scott, I didn't tell you this. I noticed that. Like you can tell when people approach somebody of importance, their body language changes. And I saw that when people were approaching Scott. And it's beautiful because when you're around Scott, you don't know this. If you're the boss, you don't have to say it. And that is Scott Duncan, a businessman, phenomenal husband, phenomenal father, phenomenal friend, one of my fastest friends in the last 2 years. I am happy as hell to bring you on the show, but I'm sorry the listeners have to put up with you for the next 45 minutes. Welcome to the show, bro.
Man, Chris, I don't honestly, like, I started to sweat. Like I'm sweating right now after you started saying that stuff because I mean that's incredible. And probably the only thing that's true that he said is how fast of friends we are, Dimitri. Like Chris is, I mean, literally, I would consider. Hopefully, he agrees. I mean, somebody that I would consider one of my best friends now, and somebody that I would call if I have a real problem. And it's just incredible. So, I mean, keep in mind I live in Western South Dakota, so you came out here, and if I'm a big deal, there's only like 8 of us out here, so like it's just not that big a deal. But no, thank you for that. Like it is nice to hear somebody brag about you once in a while. So I appreciate that, buddy.
Yeah, don't get used to
Yeah, no, it had to hurt you to do that. So
it.
Well, Scott, I'll say hearing that introduction, I kind of started getting these flashes of a Western movie and maybe the sheriff rolling through town, kind of got the shoulders down and pistols on both sides. So got the
and
Scott the cowboy, I think, at least as far as I'm concerned.
it's funny that Chris says that because, like, he's the guy that's like the jujitsu guy and someone that I would definitely stand behind if anything goes down. And I'm pretty unassuming, right? I'm not, I definitely I want to be a bigger, tougher guy. I'm working on it, but that's just it's just so no, it's I think it is really nice for you to say that, Chris. But I think a lot of it is just when you live in a certain area for a long period of time, you try really hard to when you're in business and you're trying to build something, and you encounter a lot of people, especially in the sales background, and those types of things. And so I mean, yes, I feel good that maybe I might be well respected in some circles, but a lot of it is just people that I know and people that I've done business with here for a long time. And so it is one reason I think it's an advantage of living in an area for a period of time. I mean, I've lived in other areas of the country, and this is home. And so it's helped me as well in business. So
That before we get into our segment and the segment we like to do, and one of the favorite segments here of our audience is the man in the arena. So before we get into that, I actually want to highlight what Scott just said, which is something I'd never heard before, because all the advice I've ever heard is you got to move into a big city, you got to go to San Francisco, you got to go to LA, you got to whatever, Miami. Scott saying, hey, wait a minute, there's an advantage of living in a small town.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, 100%. I mean, you can, and I don't want to say be a big fish in a small pond. I mean, people have heard that, but I mean, I love going to Austin and I love seeing friends in Austin, and I've had those same feelings of like FOMO, right? When I'm there and I see the entrepreneur community in those places, and it's like, the thought crosses my mind, like, man, I should uproot the family and be somewhere like that. And then but I realize there's so many opportunities around me, and there's so many good people around me. And so, you kind of have to be careful not to get sucked into that, a little bit of that kind of influencer mindset, I guess, which not that that's good or bad. It's just, I think you can really succeed where you're at if you try.
I think too, and it's funny Dimitri brought that up again. We're in sync, Dimitri. Because I was telling Scott that where I feel, and I know we got to get into our segment, but I'm from Pflugerville, Texas, North Austin. It was smaller, now it's bigger, but it's still Pflugerville, Texas. And I believe that there's some people who they stayed in Pflugerville and they never really expand. Like not even just financially, business wise. I'm talking about as a person. They kind of stay in this small town. So you've been able to like be within your town but grow as an individual, and that's not it hasn't been my common experience.
Well, honestly, I think where I was is, I was building a career as a young professional. I was in business, but I always just kind of had that entrepreneur spirit at heart. Like I just knew that that was who I was, and I would credit, just starting to listen to things, starting to read books. I also had a really good friend and business partner who Chris, Eric Van Horn. I'll give him a shout out. Eric is somebody who. Um, we went to high school together. We reconnected several years ago and became, better friends later in life. But he was one who had done a lot of the things. He'd moved away. He'd built a network that was really nationwide. And so, although I was kind of making my way in the area, doing what I knew to be done, to be successful. Like he really opened my eyes to like, you don't have to stay here. There's so many opportunities, and really, your network is really your net worth if you put it that way. And so I credit him for kind of opening my eyes to like branch out and to learn what a mastermind community looks like, to start meeting people. And so I mean that's kind of how the journey began for me.
That's it kind of reminds me of, I think, maybe one of the parents' least favorite things to hear from their kid, especially a teenager or something. There's nothing to do here. There's nothing to do here. And maybe that applies to business too. Business people, well, there's no business to be done in this town. I got to go somewhere else. Well, no. I mean, it's all in the state of mind, right, Scott? It's whether
Right.
you're a kid, a teenager, there you can find something to do, or you could get in trouble.
Yeah, 100%. And I did it all. I did both. I mean, that's a gift and the curse of growing up in a small areas. I remember being 19, going sneaking in with some older kids to our local sports bar, having some drinks, and I turned and looked one time, and like literally the chief of police was sitting in a booth looking at me, and I mean, he knew me. I mean, knew my family, knew everything else, and but there again, the good side of living here is he just kind of did this, and kind of tipped his hat, gave me the wink and the nod, and like get out of here. And I mean, so that was the beauty of growing up here and living here, and that's just how I learned to build relationships, I think. Uh, but I've expanded beyond that now. Now, like Chris said, I do like to look at bigger opportunities. I mean, I've had businesses in other states, and we're building some things out of here. And so it's not that I'm trying to just stay in this box. I really want to grow just like the rest of us do.
Well, we want to get to know you a little bit better and actually find out what it is that you do, because I don't know, and apparently Chris doesn't know either. So we're going to get to that. But we before we do that, what we want to find out is kind of what's going wrong, because a lot of times that tells us a little even more about all of us, our guests in this case, than any of the positive stuff. So a segment that we like to do is called "Man in the Arena." And I'm not going to read the whole quote, but it's not the critic who counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbles. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. So we're all men in the arena, and we like to share some of the things. I'm going to go quickly to give you an example of how it goes, and then we'd love to hear yours, Scott. So recently here, I'm getting into the busy season of Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales, a lot of things going on with sales, and clients are pushing on us, and the teams, I got to say, the team's a little bit stressed out, and we're starting to make mistakes. There's some mistakes that are costing the clients time and money, costing the business money. And, the team is frustrated. I'm frustrated. And I actually had to this is a weird thing to say publicly on a podcast, but I had to take a hot bath to calm my nerves a little bit. Okay. So yeah.
Love it. Love it.
No bubbles though. Okay. No bubbles, but magnesium flakes, that help a lot. And I'm thinking about telling my team, actually requiring each of them to take a day off next week, a mandatory day off. And I'm thinking it's going to calm all the nerves down, give everyone a chance to reset, because we can't make mistakes. And I know everyone's trying to go above and beyond, but mistakes are very detrimental. It's like one step forward, 3 steps back. The 3 steps back really, really hurts. That's what's going on with me. Scott, we'd love to hear your man in the arena.
First of all, I just want to say that like it's really cool that you guys use that quote. That's like a quote that's really dear to me. My dad, who passed, about 10 years ago, he was, in his former life was a coach and a teacher, and like that was his passion, right? He got into business later, but anyway, that was, I think, his favorite quote, right? It just really spoke to him, and so I remember hearing that as a kid. So anyway, really, really cool quote that I connect with, but putting me on the spot, I'm going to use one that it's not necessarily current, but it's the first thing that comes to mind to me, and it's something we may talk more about. But it's the first time that I got into business after having some success, and then kind of branching out and maybe getting a little bit overextended in my knowledge and my abilities at that stage, and opening a location remotely in another state of a franchise business. And it wasn't 100% our fault, but essentially what happened is we had our grand opening in March of 2020. And so you may understand, you may be able to put the pieces in place. And so basically something happened. I'm sorry, it was February 19th of 2020 is when we opened. It was within a month later that the county shut the doors on all businesses of this type. And so we had spent all this money in loans and financing and to build up this business and to launch this business, and then, essentially got the doors shut on us. And so, here it is. I think I was really smart, and I was, everything was going well. And then that was a huge, huge failure, because we had to go. It was probably a 3-year situation that we had to deal with in conjunction with all the other things that I was doing. Going through the PPP process and all the government help to just for businesses to just try to keep employees on. And in the end, we ended up having to, we sold the business. And when I say sell, it's like we threw the keys at the next buyer and ran, right? And so, so again, we could talk more about that, but it was, I want to say that it maybe ended up being a blessing, because I think I learned, we all talk about that. You learn more from your failures than you do probably from success. And so it still stings, but you're in it, right? You owe the bank, and you owe the employees, and you have a location and a lease signed, and you don't just walk away. And that was like a huge wake up call for me. So I know that's not like real current, but it just really spoke and stood out.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh man, I want to hear more about it as we go into it. I have a few questions, but I think because I know Scott very well, right? And so I have an idea what this business was and what was going on. I was there like a fly on the wall as you were going through the process of it. However, I will say this to your credit, again, whether you're cognizant of it or not. By the way, Scott, if you want more compliments from me, evidently you need to come to the
Just,
podcast
just,
because I don't.
just keep them coming, brother.
This feels
Just,
gross. It feels
just
gross.
keep them
Uh,
coming. Will you
so
call my wife? Will you call Angie, please?
Angie, I'm sorry. Like blowing his head up. You got to deal with this shit now. Anyways, um, you were we'd be in calls talking privately about stuff that this is the point of our calls. We have a call once a week where we get open about things, and you get to see somebody's heart behind it. And to your credit, shit was hitting the fan, but you were calm and collected. And I could even when your energy was coming off as not like this is Scott kind of frazzled. You were still like you never like I never saw big out of control emotion from you, if that makes any sense. And so I think there's a lesson within that, right? It's the whole when the Navy SEALs, when shit hits the fan, they breathe, they get calm, then they make decisions. And that's what I saw with you, where okay, shit was hitting the fan, and then I remember another situation where shit hit the fan and it sucked, but okay, this sucks. Let me just get this off my chest. Okay, this is my next move. Boom, boom. And so I think I don't think I know that for me that's a lesson that I've taken where okay man we are in the arena like Tyson says everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. When
100%.
you get punched in the face, okay, take it, relax, regroup, and then make your next move.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, and that is spot on. I wouldn't say it's spot on. I mean, there's probably moments privately that I was not near as calm and collected, but
Right.
really I've learned that, especially when you're in business, you're an entrepreneur. Like I said, what I learned real fast is that when things go bad, you can't walk away, right? You can walk away from a career, you can walk away from a job, you can leave it behind. But when you're the one that's on the contract, you just can't walk away. And so I guess I just kind of take the approach of like I got to get through it. I mean, it's stressful at the time, but like I said, I'm trying to look back at some of these things as learning, right? It's like you win or you learn, which is kind of
Mhm.
bullshit because you still lose,
I like that.
right?
I
And
like
nobody
that.
likes. Well, yeah, I mean that's just speak. I mean that's like motivational speak talk, but and it's true, but it still sucks to lose. But
Yes.
I don't think I would be building some of the things that I'm trying to build now if it wasn't for that, if that makes sense.
Scott, I'm wondering, where did you get the skill set to actually go through with this and to have that mindset of to push on, push forward, live to at least play another day, not necessarily get the win. You can lose, but at least you can play again.
I don't know if there's like a skill set that I developed, Dmitri. Like I think it's just trying to have character, right? During those hard times and trying to like just be true to, again, I have a very supportive wife. Like she never once was in a situation. It was like we were in this together, right? And it wasn't, and I don't want to play it down to like it wasn't again something about me that is I've always tried to be in a position where whatever risk I take, I'm not necessarily betting the farm, if that makes sense. And so, I was building a career. I wanted to get into I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted more freedom. I wanted to work for myself or not just be to answer to somebody. But I always told my family essentially, like, we'll do this, but if it goes bad, it's not going to be the end of us. And so, you hear a lot of people talking about that whole burn the boats mentality, where it's like, okay, if you have a great idea and you're really passionate about it, you got to quit the job and you just go make it happen. Well, at the stage that I decided to really branch out, I had three young kids. I had a family, I had a house, I had all the things. I just didn't that wasn't me. Like I didn't want to put us in that position. And so, as bad as things got, you know, I found that I was more stressed about the potential of failure, right? Like nobody wants to be seen as a failure. And so like those are the things that really bothered me. But I knew that like I just got to get through it. And I learned that you have to rely on your financial people, your bankers, your attorneys. Like, you just can't figure a lot of that stuff out on your own. So, so I don't want to like, I don't want this call to be about like how to get out of failure because I mean, that was one situation. But I did learn a lot from it, I guess.
Well, then let's zoom out, Scott. I was joking earlier about not knowing what you people not knowing what you do. Is there was an old show called Martin. On Martin, there was a character called Tommy, and the joke with Tommy is like he'd be talking about his job, and everybody's like, "Tommy, you ain't got no job." Like, and that's kind of how I feel about you and our group. Like you're
Yeah.
talking about these things. I'm like, you ain't got no job. You're always at a coffee shop, or you're walking around, or I've never seen you working, but you work, and you're a successful businessman. So when people say, "Hey, man, what do you do?" How in the hell do you answer that question?
I chase shiny objects sometimes, and that's a curse. But I'll try to keep it brief. But I was in the insurance consulting world for about 20 years, exiting that recently. That was a huge blessing because I was able to get into a career as a young salesperson. I was able to make a good living, make as much as I could make through sales, right? And so I built that career, did that, loved the career, but again, like I was working for someone else. And so, I got to a stage where I knew that it's not what I wanted for the rest of my life. And so that's when I got into some other. I had an opportunity to get into a business that had an operator that was looking to get out, and so that was my first business acquisition. So me and two partners bought this little company that was here in town. Had some, like I said, some older operators that just didn't really have an exit plan, and so we went in, we took it over. It already had employees in place, and excuse me. And that was my first venture into like buying a business and having operators run the business. Well, that was, like I said, that was great. It went well, and that's what led me to try to do the next thing, and that was getting into franchising. So again, I'll blame or I'll credit my friend Eric, because I called him one day and I said, "All right, buddy, I see everything that you're doing in franchising. Like, let's talk. Like, I want in. Like, again, I was at that stage where I knew everything. Everything was going to work well, right?" And so the two of us got together and we we partnered on a couple things and opened that one, the location that I was talking about, and it was a failure for those reasons. But we were able to leverage some of the territories that we had purchased previously to get into another brand after that. And so what we did is we had some unopened territories. We found better operators than what we were, if that makes sense. And we essentially brought what we had in our, the assets of the franchise business to their partnership. They were already operators in this brand. So now we're opening, we may have 10 to 12 locations open in the next couple of years. We're working on our fourth right now. And I'm just an operator, right? I was able to bring some capital. I'm able to jump on the calls and give some support and sometimes my opinion and some guidance from my experience. But they are the experts in actually doing the work and doing opening and hiring and that. So to answer your question, Chris, I've kind of positioned myself as like looking for opportunities to where maybe I don't have to be the owner operator, right? The only other thing that we did is my wife and I found a franchise location, the one that you mentioned in Rapid City. It just happened to be a nice fit for us and something that she really liked. And so we ended up buying that business close to home, and she runs that, and she really enjoys that. That's been a success. But for the most part, I've tried to build my time around not buying a job, right? Like looking to not buy a job, buy something that, can run itself with the right team. Um, that comes with a different kind of stress, right? Because the company that I first mentioned, the management company that we have, that went along great for several years, 4, 5, 6 years. It was just running, humming, everything was good. And then had a problem with my CEO that was running the company and had to kind of part ways. And then I learned real fast that like, okay, now I got to jump in and I have to fix this problem. I have to find another teammate. And so it's just to answer your question, like I guess I would just call myself a little bit of an entrepreneur. Um, I don't have one specific skill set that I've discovered, but I've just discovered I I like finding opportunities and maybe improving them more than I like building from the ground up, if that makes sense. Like if you're familiar with the visionary scale, visionary integrator scale, I'm really far on the visionary side. I'm not a very good integrator. And so I've had to learn over time, like to make sure if I ever do get in a partnership, I can't get I can't get in a partnership just because I like this partner. I have to get in this partnership because they balance me out on the integrator side of the scale. So that was a really rambling question, and you probably still don't know what I do, but I essentially I now am an owner in several businesses that operating businesses and looking for additional opportunities. That was a terrible answer.
No, Dmitri, I know you have a question, but what I hear you saying is you're a professional not doing shit. It's basically what you made a shit ton of money
Well,
by finding ways not to work. No,
I think
it's
that's the
brilliant. I
secret,
love it.
though. That's the secret to making a lot of money. You
Yeah,
gotta
it
do
really
nothing.
is.
and it's funny that you said that because honestly, man, there's people that live in my town that I've known my whole life, and they see me as the insurance guy, right? And what they don't realize is like that's not even what I do anymore. And so
Hmm.
they don't, but again, I think that's just part of you can either be that influencer and trying to gain recognition that way, which I respect that, and I'm not saying that that's not a good way to go, but that isn't the way that I've found. I have a hard time, I guess, speaking about my successes. If you know me, Chris, I mean, our mutual friend Joe from he was out here as well. He's from New Jersey, right? And he said, you people from the Midwest, like you apologize for doing something nice for somebody. And I never
That's
really
because they're
thought about it that
Canadians.
way, but yeah, well, we're in South Dakota. We're a couple states from being in Canada, but I mean, I think it's a little bit true. It's not that I'm like so humble. It's not that. I think it's just I just have a hard time, sitting here, and I mean, I do like taking those compliments, I guess. So I'm coming around.
I think I did understand what it is that you do. I mean, you're businessman, entrepreneur, but the difference is the size of the problem that you seek to find and then overcome. You look for high leverage problems, not something small that's a difference in how much it's going to pay. The biggest problem I think I see all the time with owner operators is that they actually don't know how to replace themselves as an operator, don't know how to find somebody who's reliable, who's going to do a good job. Are they even going to do half the job that I can do? No way. So I have to white knuckle this for the rest of my life. How do you handle that?
That's a great question. And what I finally come to determine is that because I was a bit of a control freak when I started in the business and like I had to be involved. But I quickly realized like I'm just not that good at that many things. Right? Like I'm just not that good. And so as soon as I realized that I could find people that were so much better than me doing certain things. It gave me that realization that like if I want to grow, if I want to have time and freedom, I have to rely on other people, right? I mean, that brings problems, but you just kind of sometimes have to let people do things, and they're not always going to do things the way that you would do them. And they might not do them as well as you would do them in some cases, but you know what? Unless you're, curing cancer or doing brain surgery, like I try. I tell my team, my management company, like we do a lot of compliance stuff for the government, and it's some low income housing and senior and disabled living and stuff like that. And and there's a high pressure to get the compliance side right. But I let them know, I'm like, you just have to do the best you can. And as long as that's what you're doing, like we will figure out mistakes as long as we just tackle them. So, it was kind of, it was a little bit of an accident, Dimitri, because again, I was just young and dumb and I had an opportunity to buy this already operating business and yeah, let's do it. So I jumped in and it was like kind of like that, what do they say, ready, fire, aim
Hmm.
situation. And that is me. So, I've made all the mistakes, still making them, still learning. So I'm by no means sitting here saying that I'm like an expert at any of this stuff.
Well, ready, fire, aim, that carries a lot of similar traits to the man in the arena quote. Because if you're
Mhm.
aiming too much, you're never in the arena.
Yep. Yep. Well, and that's another realization. Is like I used to be the guy that was like, okay, I want to start this thing, right? And I would spend all the time researching and I would be on the internet and I would try to figure it all out. And but I never get off, the starting block, right? And so I've kind of learned that it doesn't have to be perfect. If you're shooting for perfect, it's never going to happen. Um, so that's where I'm at right now.
Well, you said that a little, I don't know, a couple minutes back or a minute back or so, you said that you got into the game. It was kind of an accident, so on and so forth. Yet you've had success after success. You've had a few failures, but you've had more success than failures. And so if you're having all this success, that's not an accident. That is strategy. That's skill. And one of the things that I don't want to overlook what Dimitri said. Dimitri's 100% right. A lot of people get into the owner operator role, and they can never get out of that operator part of the role, right? And you just keep doing it. And so my question to you is how how are you able to get key players in place to where you don't have to worry about stuff and you could just show up on a phone call or offer advice or so on and so forth? How are you getting these people?
I wish I could tell you that I had a formula for it, Chris, but I think what I've found is like, and kind of maybe tying it a little bit back to marketing, because I was thinking about this call, like I'm not a marketing guy, but I think what I've done is I've tried to just market myself in a certain way, right?
Mm,
Like over time. And what that looks like is just building relationships, asking the questions, like just trying to get to know people. And so I've been fortunate in that when I have had opportunities to get into business, I've found that most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, I've had a pretty good time connecting with like maybe my employees or maybe somebody that I put in a management position. And I don't know if I'm the best leader necessarily, but I think I'm relatable, right? I try to make sure that I'm not put it like maybe you mentioned, I'm not trying to put myself in a superior position. I just want to be a help, right? And so I found that that has been a good leadership style for me, that people know that like I will have their back. But more so, I think it's marketing myself over time with just people in the area, people in groups, and just being uh, somebody that maybe is trustworthy, maybe they might want to work with or work for, and I guess it's worked out more times than it hasn't, I guess, so far.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that in marketing yourself. And we talk about marketing is in everything and everything is marketing. That's why we kind of like doing
Right.
the show about marketing. But you mentioned relationships, you mentioned your network is your net worth. Can you tell us more about how that really works? Because most people don't really understand. Well, like, what's the point of going and talking to other people? I'm going to do my work. I'm going to learn this skill. I'm going to study and not pay attention to their network. So tell us more
Mhm.
about how network really is maybe the most important thing.
Yeah. So I think that I've realized that more and more the later in life that I've gotten, right? But I was lucky that most of the time in my earlier years, I tried to tried to do the right thing and tried to network and just I guess one thing that I kind of the attitude that I try to keep is just like try to just give, right? Try to give without expectation. It's sort of an attitude. Now, again, like I'm not saying that that's always me, right? I'm not saying that I'm just like this perfect person, but I kind of always try to think about that. Like, how can I give? How can I bring value to somebody else without trying to extract that value back? And um, uh, one thing that really hit me more recently was, and I might have, I don't know if I told Chris this story or not, but I had a situation where, and I'll bring this back to your question, Dimitri, but I had a situation where I have a friend and who I consider kind of a mentor. He's a little older than me, and he's he's got to a level of success that like my mind doesn't even allow me to try to dream of, right? Like, I mean, there's people bigger, but like he's just very successful in business and but he's been a very big help to me in a lot of different ways. Um, and so I had a phone call just out of the blue a month or two ago, and he called me and he knew that my daughter, I have a 19-year-old daughter, and she's building a little photography business and some social marketing and things like that. She's doing a great job. Well, he called me and he said, "Hey, I need some help. I'm looking for I need to kind of work on my personal brand," because he was looking to raise some money for some things. And he said, I know you might have some contacts for me." But he said, "But also I want to talk to you about Taylor because I know that she's doing some social media and she's doing some video." And he said, I don't know if she's in a position or at the stage of her career to be able to do like what I need, but I'd love to figure out if there's a way for me to find a fit for her. Like if she could, and it would be a good learning opportunity for her." And so again, like he was just and the reason I tell the story is because I told him, I said, it's just incredible that you would think of my kid in that way. And she's obviously not at an agency level to be able to do but if there's some way that she could, just piggyback on this. And so anyway, what he told me is, I said, thank you. Like, thanks for thinking of me enough to think of my daughter in that way. Right. And he, he said something that I think stuck with me a lot. And he basically was saying, you know, I consider your past actions, he was just talking about people in general. I consider your past actions as really the reason why you're going to get that future phone call. Right. And so, he's like, you've earned the right to receive this phone call through your past actions, value you've added, integrity that you've shown. And like he said, I look at like, do you model do you physically model the things that are coming out of your mouth, right? And that, I think, Dimitri's, like, the answer to your question is, I learned it by accident, but it's like you can't just go extract value from people without maybe providing some value and it might have been in a different way, right? It might not have had anything to do with that, and you might not even know. Like, I never thought about it like that, but he's like, you earn the right for future opportunities based on your past actions, is kind of, paraphrasing that. And so I think that hit me a lot, because I'm like, well, maybe some of the things that I've done in the past will eventually come to pass, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
it makes
then,
sense. Real quick, Chris, I just wanted
yeah,
to
please go
comment on
ahead.
that. Was that I think it's an important call out, because networking, the word, is kind of a dirty word in the corporate world. It's a guy who's shaking everybody's hand and like, here's what I
Right,
do, here's what you do. Nobody really likes that guy, right? And
Right,
he might get some business,
right.
but it sounds like, Scott, what you're saying is it's actually the human connection and doing what you're saying. Kind of reminds me of that. I don't know if any of you guys like The Office and the Michael Scott
Oh yeah.
Rolodex, where he
Yep.
actually had like all these things about people and he remembered the little details and he actually got the sales.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think it's like, I heard somebody say one time that, like, people remember how you made them feel, right? They don't remember what you tried to tell them. They don't remember what you tried to, they just remember how you made them feel. And so I remember my parents telling me as a, young professional, is like, you know what? If you just ask somebody about their kids, right? Like, just ask them about their kids, and already you are, you're going to be remembered by them in a positive way, because it's not about you. It doesn't have to be about you. It's how did you make them feel. So again, like I'm quoting some things that I'm still aspiring to be, right? Like that's my attitude. That's my goal. I'm not, I mean, Chris knows me, like I'm not always that person, right? I'm just a mean dude like he is, but
Shit. Like, well, the thing with the whole networking thing is, let's say, let me go back to Chris 3 years ago or 4 years ago. I'd be like, hey, I'm not an extrovert. I don't like talking to people. I don't have a lot to offer. I don't know blah blah blah, this, that, and the other. I have a statement and a question. Statement being is, I met you at essentially what, there's a purpose to the events, but you're also networking in the events, right?
right.
Like, it just happens by nature. And Scott's not the guy out there who's big personality, talking loud, joking, blah, 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 the center of this or whatever, yet you still make an impact, right? Just, it's like the tortoise hair thing. You're just slowly influencing people by conversation by conversation. So I want to make the statement that you don't have to have this big gregarious personality to network. It doesn't take that. It's all about what Scott said is how you make people feel. But in addition to that, Scott, if somebody was to say, hey, I don't have a lot to offer, I don't know how I can make myself memorable, blah, 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 other than asking about people's children, what would you tell that person? What advice would you give them?
I think it's just there's no quick way to do that, but like everybody has something to offer. I mean, that's, no matter what. What I took, like getting into that like marketing world or mastermind or networking communities. I mean, I went in there the same way, Chris, where it was like, okay, I'm paying to be in these rooms, right? I'm writing checks to potentially be in this room. I need to go in there and I need to extract value and I need to meet this person and this guy. I've listened to this guy on a podcast. Like I have to meet this guy. And then the reality is when I got there, I found myself like not really enjoying that process that much, because the person that I really felt was important to meet, maybe we just didn't have that good a connection, or maybe like
Yeah.
it felt pressed. And so what I decided really quickly in those situations is like, I'm not going to force it, right? But like you always make, if you try, you're going to make connections with somebody. And if you make a connection, you and I connected right away. It was just easy, right? Those are the connections to follow. And so I guess number one, you just got to get in the room, right?
Yep.
Like we've talked about that before. Like, don't be afraid to get in the room, because if you're not in the room, it's never going to happen. And so you just got to get in the room. It's like, my dad got into sales later on after his coaching career, and he used to tell me like, sales is just picking up the phone, right? Like when you dial that number and somebody says hello, you're gonna say something, right? Like you might not say the right thing, but you're gonna say something. And so like 90% of it is just getting in the room, and then just not, don't try to be somebody you're not. Like, and that's probably maybe my biggest advice, because I've not reached the level of success that a lot of the people in these rooms have reached, right? But I don't feel like, anymore, I don't feel like I don't belong there, right? And I think that's it. It's like sort of getting over that imposter syndrome of
Yeah.
like, you know, once you meet those people that you put on a pedestal, many times you're disappointed. Not always, but many times.
It's funny that you say that, because that reminds me of my first experience at a mastermind. I'll make it quick. Is that I was terrified. I was underqualified to be in that room. I was in my mid-20s. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd never been to anywhere like this before. And I get finally, the whole morning I'm stressed out and everyone's so intimidating. I get to lunch and the guy next to me is just slopping it up, like no manners, nothing. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, we're all people here. We get, and that just brought the whole guard down and the wall down. And the other point is that like wanting to meet this person, that person, not connecting. For me, I found that I'll just sit at any random table. It all just a whatever table. It's not seeking even anything out. My favorite connections I've ever had was random by chance,
Mhm.
whoever was there.
Right. Well, and I love front row dads. I'll give a shout out to front row dads. One of the things that they do really well is put you in positions to maybe do one-on-one meetings, and so that was also a big learning experience because I would go to these events and like I want to hang out with Chris or I want to hang out with this guy or this guy, and then I get paired up with somebody else that maybe I didn't really consider. And every single time that I spend time with somebody one on one, I'm impressed. Like I'm impressed, or I end up like feeling bad that maybe I wasn't as excited to get paired with this person or this person because that's what I said. Like everybody's got something to bring to the table, um, most of the time.
Well, Dmitri, how are we doing on time, sir?
Well, I want to get into a little bit more, but since Scott mentioned FRD, I want to get a little dive into there, and because I mean, Chris and I are both members also, so
Yeah,
yeah, let's talk because a lot of businessmen maybe get caught up in that life, and with FRD is where we're intentional about not doing that. So I'd
yeah.
love to know more about how you're doing that.
Yeah. I mean that's been a great experience for me. I know you guys probably feel the same way. I was always tried to be the dad that I've coached my kids, and whether they like it or not, as youth, I've coached and I've tried to be involved, and because of my flexibility and in work, I try to be around. And but what I realized when I got into front row dads is like there's a difference between being there and being present, right? And so that's been a really valuable tool for me to learn like being present is more important than just being there, and that's not always. And the other thing is like again, I've heard people say these things. I can't give credit because I'm terrible at remembering who tells me these things, but it's like working long hours, even if it's for the benefit of your family, like being away and working like that, people wear that as like a badge of honor, right? And that's like the opposite of what I want to be. Like I don't want to be that person who's spending their life at the office to try to get to a certain level of success. Um, and I want people to think that's really great. Like I'd rather be the guy that Chris was like, well, like what the hell do you do all day? Like, but I can be there for, and I realize that everybody's got a situation, everybody's got responsibilities and work, and that's not what I mean. But there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that they brag to you about how many hours they work and how long they're away and all of those things. And like I meet somebody like that anymore, and I'm just like, I'm just not that interested in talking to them. So, those are some of the things that I think Front Row Dads has been really good for all of us, to try to hone in on and aspire to be, I guess.
I got one question on that. I'm gonna I guess if there was such a way of kicking myself in the balls, I'll do it here on the podcast. But it is I think, and you guys tell me this, both you being front row dads, I think that you get in front row dads and it's good to have the title. And it's like it's good to say, hey, I'm an FRD, I'm a front row dad. It's good to tell people I'm part of this community. It's good to like talk it and blah blah blah. But for me, my wife brought up an example, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago or whatever, where I wasn't walking the walk. Like my calendar did not reflect that I'm a FRD. You know what I mean? The shit sounds good. Wear the hat. I
Hmm.
wear the hat. Blah blah blah. Put it on my Facebook. Digital creator, husband, father. Like, it feels good to say all this shit. When it comes down to doing it, it's
Hmm.
harder. Even when you're in this community. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so I'm making that shift and still tweaking it. But I guess my question to you, Scott, is for those cats who think that oh yeah, I'm a husband, father, I put it first, blah, blah, blah. For those cats who think they're doing that, but maybe are not, and maybe are happier with the title, happier to talk it than walk it, what would you say to those individuals?
I
Like
would
me.
just tell him that no, Chris, like number one, like I know you well enough that's not you. Like all of us are trying to just continually improve, right? And me too. But I guess what I would tell that person is like that they better just keep coming. Like they better just keep coming because
Yeah.
it's just like I know, like you and I have talked, like we're in totally different situations. Like I have 19, 16, 12, like those are my kids, like girl, boy, girl. Um, and you're in a different stage of that. And so it's like you will realize when they are getting ready to leave the house or leave the home, or when they're in high school and they don't want to spend as much time with you, like you will realize like what you maybe should have done. And I have those feelings now, and like I said, I've been trying to be around as much as possible throughout their lives. And so I can't imagine being in a situation where I wasn't in that. And so yeah, there's people that will listen and there's people that won't. And
Yeah.
we're all like, again, like you have to do what you have to do. So like I'm not saying that if you got to go to work every day and you got to go punch in, you got to work overtime to support your family, like that is honorable, right? But the people that I'm talking about are the people that
Yeah.
like continually find ways to be traveling for work and continually find ways to be gone. And because man, raising kids is tough, right? It's tough. So I mean, I'm not in a position to like try to give everybody advice about being the perfect father by any means. But I think the only thing that all of us on this call obviously have done is like made a decision. We want to do the right thing. Like we want to be better husbands and fathers and whatever. So yeah, like I, I don't want to come across as like preaching to people because I'm the one that needs to take the preaching many, many times.
Yeah, I think we're all like that, and we're all aspiring to do better, and yet we fail sometimes. It's funny. Chris and I had a podcast maybe a few months ago where we talked about religion, and we talked about. I think Chris, you mentioned how people walking around with a cross, but they don't really live that reality of being a Christian. And if anybody wants to listen to that episode, I think we were ranking or comparing or something fun that we did with religion. So if you want to get offended, go ahead and listen to that one.
I will check that out.
Yeah, but like in this world, in the marketing world, the mastermind world, do people, I mean, there's a temptation. There's a temptation to get to the next level and make this much and exit that company and maybe trying to do it all. Yeah, that's a whole
Yeah.
saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
the women love to say also doing it. I want to be the mom and the provider and this and that. And like, well, and same thing with men, right? We want to have the family. We want to be head of household. We want to be good husbands. Yet we're still pushing in business wise. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard.
Well, and I think too that like I credit this whole new networking world and mastermind world and influencer world. I credit that with a lot of things that has helped me along the way, like has helped me push me to be better at a lot of things. But I also, and even front row dads, I'll say, I also feel like it's a trap too sometimes because you know what? I mean, we all know, like, you just try to keep it up. You're trying to keep up. And I think even at front row dads events, I think that it can
Yeah.
be a little bit of a trap to be careful not to, like, I would come home from some of those events and like my family hasn't created a family crest and my family hasn't created all this banking system for their kids and my family hasn't done this and my kids are screwed because like they haven't learned all of these things about entrepreneurship from but then it was like, okay, hold on, like kids are successful, kids are doing good, like we have a loving family like so I think it just, you have to be careful not to like fall into that trap of feeling like a failure because you're not to that level. It's and that's a hard thing constantly to judge. We're always judging ourselves against other, and especially you going into front row dads with kids that were maybe like teenagers on down. Oh my gosh, the first couple of meetings, I'm like, oh man, like I didn't do any of this stuff when they were little, But then you sit back and think about, oh my gosh, but yes, we did. We just did it in a different way, you know.
Mhm.
So I'm just trying not to beat myself up over, mistakes, right? It's just try to just keep improving, I guess.
That's an amazing lesson to learn. Chris, do you have anything else before I wrap this up?
I don't. I really enjoyed this episode. Both you guys, good energy, good talk. I appreciate it. I am happy right now.
Well,
I,
and likewise, Scott. Go ahead, Scott. Before you want
no,
to
no,
say
no,
something.
no. I just wanted to say, I just really want to say thanks. Like, I mean, Dimitri, I can't wait to meet you in person, and CG, I can't wait to, spend more time with you whenever. And like, this was fun. I don't consider myself, a worthy podcast guest, a lot of times, but this was really fun just to chat.
Now, we were joking before we got on if this was going to be a 3 hour podcast, and unfortunately, it's just under an hour long. And I feel like we're just scratching the surface. Such
Yes.
a pleasure to get to talk to you, Scott. Likewise, in terms of meeting in person, I can't wait for it. Maybe we can get you back on and get into even more depth here. I loved having you on. It was a great episode.
I appreciate it, guys. Anytime if there's value that I might be able to bring, I'm ready. So it's
We
fun.
won't be bringing Scott back then because there ain't no value
I'm gonna go take a nap now because I just expended everything that I've got. So no,
added.
no, no, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott Duncan, for coming on. If anyone, I mean, do you work with people or anything? Like, can
Yeah,
people get in touch with you?
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, you can find me. I'm not like again, I'm not like the influencer guy, but find me on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. And you know what? I'd like to love to talk to anybody that has ideas, or I'm looking at some consulting opportunities. And so yeah, I just love connecting with people, and I love chopping about business ideas and entrepreneurship. And so would love to talk to anybody that's interested.
If you're listening to this and you're hearing that, I think you should take the opportunity to reach out to Scott, especially after what he was telling us about networking. I mean, you never know what can happen in a conversation. So please go out and reach out to Scott and talk to him, and then let us know what if you end up making a deal or making just a connection.
100%.
Scott, do you have a handle or anything, or like is it
You know what? On Instagram, I'm just Dunk Dad, so Dunk_Dad.
all
So
right?
you can find me there, and otherwise it's just me on Facebook. Like you just gotta friend me. Like again, like I need you guys to help build me maybe a little bit more of an actual presence. Like that's probably what I need to do. Again, it's
Yeah.
like I'm getting dragged into that world a little bit, and so
Welcome to the
so
dark side, bro.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm simple still on the socials.
All right. Well, we'll put those links in all the descriptions here for the videos. Thank you so much for coming on. Chris Gray, so good to see you every time. Love it. I'm Dmitri Smirnov. We'll see you next time.
Peace.